pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to our Tuesday, September 3rd school board meeting. We will start with our agenda, approval, deletions, additions. Dr. Veraco.
Thank you, Mrs. Seuss. You do have a revised agenda before you under Roman numeral 7A3. We have added the Buddy Bags presentation to the agenda. Thank you.
Motion to approve?
Motion by Ms. Kelly,
I'd like to second that, please.
second by Dr. Malco. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Is there any correspondence, Mrs. Kelly?
There is not, Mrs. Seuss. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go right into our liaison committee updates. Back to you, Ms. Kelly.
I do not have anything to report this week.
All right, Ms. Talent.
I have nothing to report either.
Okay, Dr. Malco.
Nothing, I am so sorry. Nothing with legislative, other than I think that we need to get on that. Not comfortable with some of the information out there that I'm hearing. Dyer Parks will be meeting yet this week, so I'll have a report next week. Lake Central Education Foundation similarly will meet next week, so I'll have an update at our next meeting. Thank you.
And the only thing for my committees is Dollars for Scholars. We're going to be selling homecoming tickets, and 100% of those proceeds will go back in the form of scholarships, so we hope we get a large attendance. So on to our official school board business topics consent agenda. Dr. Veraco.
Thank you. Seek board approval for the executive session and regular board meeting minutes from August 19th. Also seek board approval for the claims, payroll, and extracurricular expenditures you received in your packets last week.
Motion to approve?
We have a motion by Ms. Kelly,
Second.
second by Ms. Talent. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. And we have no public comments regarding action items, so our official school board business topics regular agenda. Dr. Veraco.
Thank you again. My first item this evening is to conduct a public hearing that indicates that we are commencing formal negotiations with our Teachers Association. The exact date of that will be September the 15th, but this is the last school board meeting before that date. So we will open it up to the floor at this time to hear if any member of the public would like to comment about what we should negotiate with our teachers in the upcoming negotiation session. Everyone I see in the audience, I think, is here for a different purpose, so I'll ask one final time, though. Is there anybody who would like to comment on that topic? And since we've started this process, we haven't had anybody comment yet, but it is in Indiana code, and so we go through the formality in the event that someone were to show up. So I will close the hearing now and move on to my second item, which also relates to the negotiations this fall, and it is our tentative timeline. And so to review, we've been doing informal bargaining with our Teachers Association since the spring. I want to review for the public that our negotiations are limited to wages and fringe benefits. The main one of those is health care insurance. And so on the 15th, we will begin the formal bargaining period. We have 2 months to accomplish our task. Our goal is that by October the 16th, we have a tentative agreement posted to our website. That needs to be done 72 business hours before a board meeting, where we will again accept public comments. We will open up the floor to the public again to accept comments on that tentative agreement. Then at our next board meeting on November 4th, we would have it on the agenda as an action item, whereby the board would approve the agreement that has been reached between administration and the Teachers Association. Remember that those dates are an ideal timeline. So should our healthcare renewal, which is happening as we speak to, require us to move back the posting of the tentative agreement, we may have to schedule a special meeting to accept those public comments. And we may have to move back a special meeting for the board to vote on it if it takes us even longer. So we're not positive, but I think it's always good to start with some kind of a framework, and we'll revise it as needed. And so that is our timeline for negotiations this fall. Again, per Indiana code, we either need to be board approved by November 15th, or in the case of some districts that don't have their monthly meeting before the 15th, they have to have something in writing to the state to show that they are avoiding impasse. Our goal is, no matter what, to be done by the 15th. Any questions on that timeline?
So, Dr. Bracco, you indicated that you have started hearing from the medical world about possible prices. Is that what you were saying? It's kind of happening now, I believe.
I didn't say that, but we do meet with our consultants every month during the school year, and administration met with them last month due to the fact that our pharmaceutical costs are still really high compared to 3 or 4 years ago. And so we are going to have to make some adjustments again to our health care plan this year. So we are looking at alternatives. Mrs. Castaneda is going to a meeting later this week where some of the experts are going to talk about how they've bent the curve and flattened out some of the increases in healthcare costs. So we're looking in every direction we can, because this is essentially our third year in a row where we've spent a lot more than what we expected to. It's a key piece. When I became superintendent 15 years ago, I said we're going to keep it as good as we can for as long as we can. I think we've lived up to that promise, but across the board, costs are rising faster than even other inflationary effects on goods and services. So we have to look at what's going on there. That's what gets confusing. In fact, at our last negotiation, Mrs. Castaneda advised all of the members of the negotiating team that we would like for them to attend the renewal meetings for our health care, which will be later this month. So they're in both meetings, because in the past, when it was easy, we just got the negotiating team, and they always had at least one member sit on the benefits committee. But if the benefits committee agreed to it, since all schools are represented, that the negotiation team would take their work and accept it. Well, it's gotten more complicated the last couple of years, so now we have more and more of the negotiating team members attend. And it helps, because they need to know all the discussion.
Absolutely. It's best to hear it first person directly. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I think we're ready for Bonnie and whoever else wants to talk about the Buddy Bag.
Okay. We brought you all gifts. We brought you all a buddy bag. Yeah. Buddy Bags supplies weekend supplemental nutrition to students that are on the free lunch program. And this is Ruth Argenta, who is one of our board members and volunteers, and is also a registered dietitian, and is instrumental in making sure that the Buddy Bag contents are as nutritious as we can afford. Buddy Bag costs are right around $5 per bag. Today was our first packing for the new school year, and we packed over 600 bags. Wow. We are in the 4 school districts of the southern part of the county, Lake Central, of course, Hanover, Crown Point, and the Tri-Creek schools down in Lowell. And it was a busy day. It was cute, though. All our packers were very glad to be back online packing the bags. We have one gentleman who earlier this year turned 93, and he called me 2 weeks ago to say, "When are we hacking again? When do I come back? I'm bored." And he was there today. We also have some informational cards for you, if you want to do that. Thank you, Ruth. We actually will be handing out these cards the first Saturday in October in Crown Point. We're gonna be on a couple of the corners. I'm looking for another term to use for that kind of donation request other than street solicitation, because that, I'm not getting a lot of volunteers to sign up for that. Gotta think of a better term, I think. Janice, maybe you can help me with that. So last year, actually, this is our third year with Lake Central, I believe. Is that correct, Ruth? Our third year. You're our newest district. And last year, the numbers were quite low. This year, we've worked together on a new approach, and the numbers have more than doubled. And they keep coming in. And I get the cutest emails from my different contacts at the grade schools. I'm sorry, it's me again. Another form came in. I said, it's okay. You know, this time of year, the numbers bounce around like crazy. Fortunately, Ruth and I had stayed the afternoon at the warehouse, and I was in my office. I get on the email, and then I go, okay, Ruth, we got to pack 2 more for this school, and then 6 more for that school. It was a busy day. The Buddy Bag program started as a mission outreach at the Crown Point First United Methodist Church, grew way beyond what one church could handle. In 2020, we formed the nonprofit Community Help Network to encompass the Buddy Bag program, to help it grow and to grow other programs as well. And I guess this should be the time where I ask if you have any questions.
Well, you mentioned the warehouse. Do you want to tell them a little bit about the warehouse?
It's the old ARC building in Crown Point, across from the, I'm gonna say, the new Crown Point High School, because of course they tore my high school down. I won't tell you how long ago I was there. So we're conveniently located. We've got a Catholic church, we've got the high school, we got a grade school, and we used to have a hospital too. Anyway, that's where we are. We're in the warehouse section of the building. If you're not familiar with it, basically the ARC building is a small school with classrooms, commercial kitchen, dining hall, and we're able to do a lot of fundraising there. Matter of fact, this summer we just put on a play for the 3rd year in a row. And that brought in almost $6,000. I don't know if I had told you that yet. And I was in it, so what can I say? What else do we do? We have a bi-monthly luncheon, so we can utilize the kitchen and the dining hall there. This coming Saturday, we're having a provider fair for our clients. Our household pantry sees over 100 families every month, and that number keeps increasing as more of our Buddy Bag families become aware of the household pantry and begin to utilize it. It provides those families with items they cannot purchase with SNAP benefits, things like toilet paper and deodorant and so on. Crazy things that we all take for granted. We know when we go to the cabinet there's going to be an extra roll of toilet paper, but if you don't have the money to buy it, you could be in a bit of trouble. So that program is open 2 days a week, 2 mornings a week, Tuesdays and Saturdays. Today was one of those days, so we had our first packing, we had the pantry open, and I was getting emails about every 5 minutes.
Wow.
What am I missing here, kiddo? Did I cover everything? What else do we do? We have a garden. Anybody need cherry tomatoes? Those are really
Do you
the big tomatoes, not so much, but those little cherry tomatoes.
Do you want to tell them a little bit about the first and third Saturday? Because maybe some of them will want to stop by.
The luncheon is, we
Yeah.
call it Ladle of Love. And what's really special about it, it started out as kind of a soup kitchen idea. That's how it got its name. But now we have partnered with Tavern on Main in Crown Point, and we'll make an entree, they'll make an entree. Christy Erlotti from Full Plate Catering will come in and make a salad or desserts or both. So we've got a lot of this community involvement in it as well. Great Harvest Bread in Crown Point. Oh, they have good bread. They provide bread and sweets on Tuesday or Saturday mornings. We can go in and pick up donations, and then also Thursday mornings. So we can utilize those for our luncheon. We can also give those products to our household pantry clients, which, you know, those loaves of bread are like $9 or $10 a loaf. So to be able to give someone who's on a really tight budget something they would never go out and buy feels good. It just feels good to help people. But yes, come to a luncheon. Once in a while, we even have music. We have a keyboard, and once in a while, we get somebody to play that keyboard. Okay, you did it once. Yeah, yeah, people left early that day for some reason. I get a lot of requests for singing tenor, 10 or 12 miles away. Can you sing a solo? Solo, we can't hear you? Ruth was telling someone today, we don't have dad jokes, we have Bonnie jokes. That's because my dad was a jokester. He was quite a character. Are there any other questions?
Yeah,
All right,
thank
well,
you.
thank you. Thank you for your support. Janice, who is also on our board of directors, and will help keep you all informed about events and fundraisers that we have coming up, and that you can share that is very helpful to us. And I gotta say, the contacts that I'm dealing with in your elementary schools are wonderful. Yeah. Some of them are new, but we're being gentle.
Well, thank you for all that you do.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
thanks,
ladies.
Bonnie. But really, I want to reiterate, if you're available on a Saturday to go over the first and third Saturdays of the month, just to go in and see the excitement. It's all this wonderful food that's been prepared for people that
You know,
need to
a
be
lot of-
fed.
We have a very eclectic group that comes. We have older adults, seniors. We have adults with disabilities that are regulars. A lot of our household pantry clients come in.
It's
Just a little
fun.
bit of everybody comes in.
It's a great place. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rita.
Thank you,
Appreciate
everyone.
it.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to our Assistant Superintendent, Mrs. Castaneda.
Thank you. For my first item, I'm seeking the board's approval for the personnel recommendations.
So moved.
We have a motion by Dr. Malco, and I will second that. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. And for my second item, I'm seeking the board's approval for the professional leave requests.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Kelly,
Second.
second by Ms. Talent. Any questions, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Bracy has nothing this week, so we'll move right to Mrs. Schoeneman, Director of Secondary Education.
Thank you. For my first item, I'm seeking the board's board's approval for the professional leave requests included in your packet.
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Malco, and I will second that. Any discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And for my second item, I am seeking the board's approval for the field trip request also included in your packet.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mrs. Kelly. And again, I will second that. Any discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. And I see Mrs. Gramala's not here, so Ms. Castaneda.
Thank you. For Mrs. Gramala, I'd like to seek the board's approval for her professional leave requests.
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Talent,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Kelly. Any questions, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, and move right into our Director of Business Services, Mr. James.
Thank you. For my first item, I seek your approval for the donations that were included in your board packet.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Kelly,
Second.
second by Mrs. Talent. Questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And for my second item, I'm going to do our 2025 budget presentation to the board, and then when that concludes, I will seek your approval to advertise said budget. So I will be using the projector if you would like to move. All right, well, welcome. So this is the annual budget presentation. Hold on So we're going to go over the calendar, things that went into the preparation for this, some of the challenges we're facing. The other piece is we have to advertise a capital projects plan, a bus replacement plan, and then we'll get into the detail of the estimated budget amount, the tax levy, and the rate. Compare it historically to how we've been in the past, and then my final recommendation. So here we are, September 3rd. This is the budget presentation. Pending your approval, we will post notice of our public hearing on Thursday, and then we will have our public hearing, our regularly scheduled meeting on on September 16th, and then formally adopt the budget at our regularly scheduled meeting on October 6th. So we received our 2024 certified budget from the DLGF on January 2nd. They usually like to have those done by December, but we got it early enough in '24. Our net assessed value for 2024 is just over $5.7 billion for the properties in our district. So that is not the value of our 10 or 12 buildings for Lake Central. That is the value of all the properties within our boundary after you take out your mortgage deduction and homestead deductions and so forth. So that's in essence the taxable value. Our referendum funds, we have our debt referendum and then our 17-cent operating referendum. Because those are voter approved, we get to use a higher assessed value for those calculations. That number is higher because we've talked about TIF districts here multiple times. The value of those properties within the TIF district are part of the $6.3 billion that we get to use for the assessed value for the referendum funds, which helps us out a lot. So in 2024, our net assessed value increased about $176 million, about 3% from the prior year. Similar amount for the referendum funds. Preliminary indications are that we're going to be up about $471 million from 24 to 25, about an 8.25% increase in the values across the district. So just kind of to review, the state has a biannual budget, and that was done last year in 2023, and that two-year budget affects our school funding formula for the two-year biennium. And so again, just to review, there was about $1.5 billion increase over this time frame for K-12 education in Indiana. It's the largest dollar amount in history. Please note that about a third of that was for the expansion of vouchers, but we're not here to talk about that. But it is $1 billion into public schools. Statewide, the tuition support was increased about 7.9% for this past fiscal year, and about 2.2% in the current 24-25 year. You will see that on these next two slides that the state went heavy on the first year and then not so much of increase in the second year. And we've talked about that during my financial reports of when we see a financial cash balance in some of our key funds, we knew that this was the case 15 months ago, so we've had to make sure that we didn't go all in ourselves because we weren't going to be getting that much additional dollars here for the 24-25 school year. Again, the foundation amount, which is like the base amount that every school district gets, went up about 5.5% last year, but it's only 1.5% this year. And the same with the complexity grant, 5.5% last year and 1% the current school year. So we are thankful for those increases last year, and that of course flows into this year too. Special ed grants increased 5% each year. The NESP program got a big funding increase last year, 34%, about 5.5% for this year. Career and tech ed, 5% each year, and more money was put into the secured safety grant at the state level. So I'm just kind of going just a little history here because what was done 15 months ago is really affecting us now for this next upcoming year. So this slide shows how much is in the K-12 budget at the state level for tuition support, and you can see how much that has increased over the last half a dozen years. Our amount has also subsequently increased each year as well,
we are looking at approximately $6,945 this school year per student. So now some challenges. So if you're trying to figure out a budget in your home or what you can afford to spend, the first thing you got to figure out is what's my revenue going to be? You know, how much am I bringing in? So our main tuition support into our education fund is all based on our ADM count. And the ADM count is done twice a year, once in October and again in February. And whatever our student count is going to be here on October 1st of '24 will determine what our funding is for the July to December year now. So right now they're basing it on an estimate. They'll do our ADM count, and then they will adjust the November and December distribution to us to make it right. And then the January through June of '25 revenue is based on our February count. So here I am presenting a budget to you for calendar year '25, and those are going to be based on ADM counts in February of '25 and October of '25, let alone the second half of '25 will be based on a funding formula that will be different in the next General Assembly's long session in their budget. Right now, I'm running out of formula that is for this current school year. July through December will be a completely new formula. So we have some challenges to face because we really don't exactly know what the revenue is going to be. We just know what our trends are, and we watch that student count regularly, not only throughout the summer, but now, and adjust staffing accordingly. So as we've talked about before, one of the biggest issues that we have, and it's not just us, it's all school districts pretty much around the state and around the country, is that our student population is decreasing. And it's not because people are necessarily moving down the road to another district. It's because the incoming kindergartners are smaller classes than the graduating seniors. The birth rates in the country are much lower than they were 15, 18 years ago, and it's just, the cohort just changes. So right now, we are looking to be down approximately 200 kids district-wide from our count from last fall. So if on that last slide, we were getting just under $7,000 a kid. So theoretically, if we didn't lose any kids at all and we had the exact same amount, we'd have about almost $1.4 million to play with. But that doesn't happen because everyone's population is going down accordingly. But that second sentence is something I want to focus on here, is that based on the current funding formula, with our student count being down 200 and then probably down another 75 kids or so in February because of graduates at the high school, maybe a few expulsions, we're probably going to be getting around $260-some thousand less revenue this year than we had last year from the tuition support at the state level. So our costs increase, and then from the state, we're actually going to be getting less money. It's rare because this is usually we're not down this many kids, and usually the increase in the funding is enough to make up for that difference. Maybe we're getting 2% in new revenue, but when you saw in those previous slides that we're only looking like a percentage and a half in the dollar amount per kid, we're actually going to have a net loss or a net decrease in our revenue. And this is probably going to be the trend for a while, because even though our high school classes may not be 800 anymore, maybe they're 750, but we're still only getting 500, some close to 600 kids coming in at kindergarten level. So we are facing that trend. Now, one of the other things that helps us, though, is that us and some of our neighbors are still destinations of choices for people to move from Illinois, from other communities. So as we've seen when we've talked about the ADM changes, even though we might usually have 200 less kids coming in, usually our ADM decreases not as much because we get more move-ins in all the other grade levels. And I will say that in May-ish, it looked like we were going to be down 400. So we're actually happy at the 200 level where we are now. And you know, listen, when you're going to be down that many kids, and we've been down smaller amounts of kids every year, it's our responsibility as administrators to adjust our expenditures accordingly. We adjust our staffing. If you're down, you know, 100 kids every year and don't make any adjustments, well, 7 years later, you're down 700 and you have the same staff. And it's like, what happened? What just happened here? So our administrative team with Mrs. Castaneda and the curriculum directors, this whole summer, were conscious of this, really looking at our numbers and making sure whenever a retirement or a resignation happened, we were looking at that staffing and, you know, would we really need to replace that position automatically? And we've done a really good job with that, so. Excuse me. So now, one of the things that also happened was curricular materials. These are textbooks, labs, foods in the foods class, science kits, everything that is used to deliver the curriculum in the classroom. Well, the state took that over here in 23-24 and appropriated $160 million annually to cover those costs. And beginning last year, we can no longer charge parents for any textbook rental fees. So in essence, they took the total number of kids in the state, and it was a little bit over 1 million kids, and divided that into the $160 million appropriation, and every school district got approximately $158 per kid in funding from that. So here at Lake Central, we got a little over $1.4 million in curricular materials from allocation from the state. Problem is, we spend about $2.2 million a year annually in that category, so we were short $700,000. And that's going to happen again this school year because the appropriation is the same at the state level in the 24-25 year as it was in 23-24. My hope, now, first of all, the $160 million pretty much was pulled from the sky initially. There was really no date. Can't seem to find to have much data to support that, where that came from. At least now, going into the next budget session, we'll have 2 years' worth of data collected by the DOE from all schools. And I'm hoping, maybe foolishly, but I'm hoping that once this is presented to the General Assembly, you'll be like, hey, this $160 million is too low. It needs to be 225 or whatever it needs to be. And if some schools choose to spend more than that, that's on them. If schools charge less currently, well, maybe that gives them an opportunity to provide more programming into their schools for the kids that they serve. That's just my hope. We'll see what happens by next April or May. But again, it's something that it's a challenge that we're facing on that, because that shortfall, we have to have those expenditures. We need to provide that material. That is, in my mind, you know, I can't tell Misty and Yolanda, hey, you have to cut your curricular expenditures by a third. That's hurting our kids, and we're not going to do that. So we're going to get creative, and we figure it out, and that's what we do. So you got a question?
Well, I'm sure that you have mentioned this, or at least through IASBA have mentioned it to the legislators. What kind of reaction are you receiving to that problem that has been created?
The ones that I've talked to, they realize it's an issue. And so hopefully, I mean, I don't want to say, hey, it's only $50 million. It's only $75 million to get there, because I would sound like a fool to say that. However, just remember they put an additional $1 billion into the budget in K-12 last time. So I'm hoping the 100, you know, another 75 isn't too much to ask. You know, I don't know. But that's why all the education associations have lobbyists to bring these facts to them. It's not just waving a flag, we want more, we want more. It is based on actual data. So we'll see. In the short session, there was yet another change. House Enrolled Act 1120 was passed, and there was many parts of that bill. But our curricular materials fund, our old textbook rental fund, where all these expenditures ran through, is going away effective January 1st. And in essence, all those expenditures that was normally running through that fund are now being moved into our education fund. So you will see when we get a few more slides down the road, That's about $2.5 million worth of expenditures that normally were not in our education fund that will start to be running through there starting in 2025. Hence, we need to increase the budget. Theoretically, we're getting the revenue on the back end to support that, maybe just not at 100%. Another piece that we're keeping our watchful eye on is House Enrolled Act 1557, which requires school districts to differentiate the pay for anyone who obtains the new early literacy endorsement. Of course, we were not provided any additional funding by the state to pay for this additional cost, but, so that requirement begins next school year, 25-26, but there's still a lot of questions out there. As of now, there's been no guidance from the Department of Ed or ERB or the General Assembly regarding, what's the minimal pay differential? Is it a certain percentage? Is it $1? Who knows? Can it be paid as a stipend, or is it gonna have to be added to the base salary? And if it adds to the base salary, then it's really throws off some of our charts, and hoping that's not the case. Another question is, what happens if the teacher obtains the endorsement in the middle of the school year? Do they get a prorated amount, or does it just take effect the following school year? And also, what if a staff member gets the endorsement because it's part of their licensure, but maybe they're not currently teaching in a classroom role? Maybe they're one of our coaches, or maybe they're doing, I'm not sure about all the different licensures out there, but you can have someone in the middle school who has that K to something license, and maybe they get the endorsement, but they're not teaching it, so do they get it? I don't know. So, again, that's gonna be an added expense for us. We can't even put a price on it at this point, so we'll see. So that's revenue. Expenditures, payroll and benefits comprise about 87% of our expenditures for operating funds. As Larry already mentioned, health insurance costs continue to rise for our district and our employees. And we continue to see increased costs in other operating areas, such as our property insurance, which is going up about 18 to 20% a year. That's a couple $100,000 a year. Don't like that. Even though we haven't had any claims, but I digress. Utilities, security, technology, cybersecurity measures. We've been investing a lot from our tech department in those measures to make us as less risky as possible. You're never 100% out of the woods, but whatever we can do to try to reduce our risk of having a cyber attack, getting hacked. We have a lot of data. We've got a lot of employees, school districts all across the state. Some of our neighbors have all been down. So we're trying to reduce that. I'm not saying, they say it's not a matter of if, but when, and hopefully that when is when some of us aren't here anymore. But we really trying to invest money in there. And then school buses, again, that cost has gone up about 20% a year as well, ever since the pandemic. So all those areas here, we're saying we're having increase in some of these operating areas, yet we're going to see a decrease in the revenue and the ed fund. So a lot of moving parts. So one of the bases for how much revenue we're going to generate, the revenue that we get from the taxpayers is called the levy. And that is what is levied against the property owners in our community, and that generates the money that we use to pay our bills. So again, the net assessed value is the value of all the properties. So when the net assessed value goes up, then that could cause your tax rate to go down if you had the same need, because it's just a 3-variable equation. You take the assessed value, you multiply it by the rate, and that gives you the levy. Now, sometimes 2 of the 3 parts might be fixed. So for our example, our referendum fund has a flat approved 17-cent rate. So if the 17 cents is going to go against that assessed value, so when the assessed value goes higher, we're still applying the same 17 cents to it, which will bring in more dollars to the school district. That's good. We'll say I'm a debt fund and I have the same debt payments each year. My need is the same, But if I'm dividing my need into a higher number, then the rate that needs to be multiply that is less. So when a school district has a lower tax rate, the chances are, depending on where those properties are, their circuit breaker losses from the tax cap will be less because it's a lower rate going against the values. We're fortunate here that we have a high assessed valuation, and you'll see here on the next slide or two, which means, we have a high AV, we have a low tax rate. That means we do not have much of a circuit breaker loss at all, unlike some of our neighboring districts. So this slide kind of shows the estimated 2025 net AVs for all the school districts in Lake and Porter County. And I've highlighted us there. We're about the fourth line from the top. So as I said, we're looking at about an 8.25% increase to going from 5.7 billion to just under 6.2 billion dollars here. The referendum funds have an assessed value of closer to 6.8 billion. But for comparison purposes, since not every school district has referendums, want to compare apples to apples here, and that shows that. So you can kind of see everyone or most school districts are seeing at least a 5% to 13, 14%, depending on what's going on in their communities. It's not just a value or a reassessment of the properties there, but for example, Crown Point, there's a lot of expansion, there's a lot of building going on, kind of what this school district township saw 10, 15, 20 years ago. So they're seeing an increase of close to 14%, but it's also a lot of expansion going on. So so that's good. You can see that our AV is significantly higher than others. So talking about the circuit breaker impact, again, because of the middle point is because of our high AV and our low tax rate, our total circuit breaker loss for 2024 was about $88,000. And in terms of a $120 million budget, 88,000 is, I don't want to say immaterial, but it's nothing that we have to make cuts about. It's about 0.18% of our levy. It's not 18%, it's 0.18%, very small. And the DLGF is estimating that our loss will be even less in 2025, around $66,000. So here is just a kind of a showing how we compare with our neighbors, 16 school districts in the county. So the levy is the dollar amount that the DLGF, or the state, feels needs to be billed or assessed to our taxpayers in order for us to meet our expenditure needs and to support our budget. If you look at some of those communities at the top, and I'll just take, we can see a trend here, right? They're the more impoverished areas. They're areas where the assessed value is low. So we all know Gary's had some financial problems over the last few years. So in essence, the calculations are they need $58 million to raise by their taxpayers to support their budget, yet so many people get capped at 1% of their value, there's nothing on the back end to make that up. So even though the state says you need $58 million, they're losing $25 million off the top, 43% of their need. So it makes it very difficult if you're in some of those other communities to try to make ends meet. Again, you can see us there at the bottom, 0.18%. Hanover, with their growing assessed value, is slightly below us. On the next chart, it's just kind of the same data in graph form, and our amounts were so slow I couldn't even change the color from red to blue for us there. So again, you hear people talking about circuit breaker a lot, maybe some other peers. It is not an issue for us here at Lake Central. Any questions as of now? That's kind of like the back part of how we got to where we are. Okay, so the next piece is we are required to have a 3-year capital projects plan. And these are for projects that we estimate that would cost over $10,000 each. Keyword here is plan. Plans change, other things come up, other things take precedence. Safety issues are always number one for the district. Cosmetic things, maybe not so much, but it all depends on how many dollars we have. So this first page kind of shows some things for 2025. You'll see lots of these are outside contracted at painting the gyms, at carpet replacements. We've had a very busy last 2 summers in our facilities department. They need to kind of catch their breath a little bit, and 25 can be a time frame, especially not knowing how the funding is going to be, of, all right, let's do some of these more cosmetic things while we have an opportunity. They're not as high dollar amounts. So looking to do some paving, carpet replacements, painting some gyms, replacing some bathroom flooring at Pifer. The gym floor has some areas at Pifer that need to be addressed as well. Moving on to the next slide is showing things for 2026 and 2027. Want to bring your attention to about the 4th line down is the tennis courts at the high school. We really need to address those, address those soon. The problem there is, you know where the tennis courts are. It's kind of like on a swampy, marshy-ish area. The cost to replace those, we're ballparking $1.5 million. We won't know until we do soil borings and get an analysis of how that soil is above it, because once you take the new one, the current ones out, you know, what type of fill might we have to put in, and that's going to be a driving factor on that. $1.5 million is not generally something we can just plug into the annual budget of our operations fund. It's probably going to have to be through a GO bond that we do, but we don't know that yet. We'll have to coordinate with the high school, given the fact that they don't really have a lot of time off. They have, and I don't know how long of a project that is, but there's a spring season for one, and there's a fall season for the other, so it's not like it's just not being used for 8 months. So we're going to start working on that. We don't feel like that's something that can be done here in 2025. One of the reasons is, again, because of the funding, and probably would need a GO bond, and we're not anticipating doing a GO bond in the spring, you know, right away, but we have some work to do on that. But I just really wanted to bring it to the board's attention that $1.5 million, it might be 1, it might be 2. We won't really know until we get a little bit more detail on it, but we know it's something we need to address. Another big item coming up is Kaler gym floor and bleachers. We've had this on the list for a few years, and we've just been doing some patchwork, and the work that the custodians and everyone doing over there is really holding up, and so we don't have the need to do it just yet. Bill feels that we can get another year or 2 out of there. We would do both the floor and the bleachers the same year. So tentatively pencil that in for 26. And then again, some more cosmetic things. RTUs are rooftop units for the cafeteria. Commons at Coling, those are air conditioning units. So any questions on our capital projects plan for the next 2 years?
Rob, I'm a little bit confused by the request for Homa to have carpet replacements in 26 and 27. Aren't we going away from carpet?
Yeah, they're replacing the carpet with tile.
Okay.
They're getting rid of the carpet.
All right, all right.
Yeah, and I believe that Holman's the last one that really, I think Bill said, there might be a little bit at Coling, or not Coling, at Kaler, but after that, Holman's the last one to really tackle. And we already did some carpet replacement there this year, so yeah, that's what it is.
All right, I was just a little bit confused on the way that terminology was stated. I want to make sure we weren't going back to the old days of carpet.
No.
And a question for you, and I didn't see it on here, but I believe that most of our schools have had secure entrances, except for Clark, am I right?
Clark, there's the vestibule, and then there's the office, right? but there's nothing you can really do there. You can't, that's a thoroughfare for a hallway, so
Right.
you can't move the office, you can't block the hallway, so that's just how the building was designed. There's,
So you don't think anything will be done there?
I don't know what could be done there.
Yeah, I don't either. I've thought about it many, many times, and I noticed that Lake Street over in Crown Point, it has dramatic changes to their entrance. But again, I don't know all the particulars. Maybe we can find out from Bill, but,
We've had the architects out there, I mean, again, you can't block that hallway.
right.
So you can't move the office, so you're kind of stuck. So,
Yeah,
I mean, I would hate to say it is what it is, but they do, you have to get buzzed in.
right.
There is a clear sight from the office, so,
And they do a good job with it.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
okay, the other piece is, of the capital projects plan is items like purchases of equipment that we have on our radar. We need to look to get a new snow removal tractor, the ones with the brushes that they use to clean the sidewalks at Coling, a new gator at Kaler, a new walk-behind scrubber at Protzman, a lawn maintenance trailer, and then 26, possibly a new dump truck with a spreader on it. Ours are getting a little bit older, and we need to plan for that accordingly, so. All right, next, the other piece is required to have a bus replacement plan. It's required to be a 5-year plan, even though the buses are replaced over a 12-year period. And so, but just because a bus is 12 years old doesn't necessarily mean we replace it automatically. Because some buses only last 7 or 8 years because of the mileage and the wear on it. Other buses are still in great shape at 13 years old. Their mileage is lower. Our mechanics are doing a great job, so we don't get rid of them just to get rid of them. But that being said, we try to be consistent with the dollar amount we spend for buses each year, kind of in that $1.1, $1.2 million range. The cost of a bus has, as I said, gone up, where a few years ago it was about $120,000 for a bus. This round for this year is about $150,000 for a traditional 72-passenger bus. You can add another 10 grand on that for our special needs buses because they have the lift. The activity buses, little white activity buses, those are running around $115,000 now. So, and those are the highest in demand. It's hard to get those, but we got 4 of them this year, so we're happy about that. So these slides just show all of our buses listed and how much we anticipate the cost going up each year. Nope, I'm gonna go back one. Hold on. So here at the very bottom, about the last 9 or so, are the buses that we ordered back in the spring. We already received 4 additional mini activity buses here this summer, which is great. That's really gonna help for trips. You don't need a CDL license to drive those. So that means coaches or club sponsors who are taking a small team or a small group somewhere, we don't need to pull one of our CDL drivers off a route to do those. We have 5 more traditional buses that are set to come in hopefully by December. And then we have 2 white trip buses that we also ordered. If you remember when we did the Geo bonds, these are kind of replacing those coach buses we had, but we're not going that coach bus route because we had so many mechanical issues with them. But they will be white and they will have some graphics on it, I think. And so hopefully those will come in by the end of the year as well. So we're already got them on our list because I'm anticipating them being there for 2025.
So you're talking they'll be here by the end of 2024, not the school year 25?
Correct.
Okay.
As of the last estimate we had was all 7 of those buses would be arriving this December.
Cool, cool.
So. Okay, so now if we get into the meat and potatoes of the actual dollar amounts, these next 2 slides show, our calculations on how we come up with what the budget amount's gonna be, the levy, again, with what we assessed our taxpayers, and the rate. This is called the 16-line statement because it has 16 lines. It's as simple as that. The format has changed on the state's website, but I still like this better because I think it kind of shows. So this is a 18-month reflection of our financials from this past July 1 through December of 25. So in essence, the top part is how much do you anticipate spending in January through December of 25? How much money are you going to spend in this 6 months? So how much money are you going to spend over the 18-month period? And then they look at, well, how much cash did you have on hand at June 30th? How much do you anticipate getting from your taxpayers as part of our December settlement? Any other miscellaneous income, excise tax, FIT tax, tuition support from the state? And then based on your other miscellaneous revenue and how much cash you have on hand, then it generates the levy of what we need to raise for our taxpayers. So for our education fund, you will see that there is no tax rate, there is no tax levy, and that is because that is all 100% in essence funded by the state, not by our taxpayers. Our operations fund, we're looking at a budget of $26 million, slight increase from this year, which would have a tax rate of 32 cents, a levy of just under 19 million. Our operating referendum fund, you will see at the bottom right there, is the flat 17 cents. That doesn't change, so that one actually kind of works backwards. You take your 17 cents, you apply it to your assessed value, that's going to determine how much money you're going to raise, and you build your budget accordingly. I want to remind the board, and we're going to show it here in a slide or two, of in my world as the business manager, I have to protect the school district, and we will advertise high. And what do I mean by that? So the most you can get is a budget of what you advertise. The highest rate that can be applied to the taxpayers is what you advertise. The highest levy of tax dollars is what you advertise. So, for example, if I said our referendum fund had a levy of $6.8 billion, and if I took just that 6.8 and timed it by 17 cents and said, okay, well, that's going to be my revenue, well, what if there's some reassessments, or what if there's some changes in between now and December, and that 6.8 became $7 billion? Well, if I can't capture that additional money that was owed or could have been captured by the school district because I didn't advertise high enough to capture it. You're limited to here. So we all advertise high just to protect ourselves and make sure we don't lose out on any revenue that can be being brought into the district. These next 3 slides are our 3 debt funds, well, kind of 2.5. We have our debt service fund, which is pretty much all of our debt. We had, and still kind of have as of September 3rd, we have our pension bond debt service fund. These are a specific fund to pay the pension bonds that were issued back in 2004, I believe, in order to help bring in dollars. Most school districts did this. It was kind of to pay for when retirees and their severance payout. They realized back in the day that, school districts had promised payouts of sick days and so forth to teaching staff, but then weren't going to have the money to pay that out. So they let you raise the money back then, and then we keep that money in a fund. And well, finally, after 20 years, those bonds are being paid off. So you will see here in this middle column, we have no budget for 2025, no tax levy, and no tax rate, because these bonds will be paid off here in 2024. And then the final column is our referendum debt fund. Since that has a different assessed value to it, it's not combined with the regular debt service fund. And our debt payments for the referendum debt, which came for the new high school in Protzman, is very consistent. It's about $12.5 million for next year. So as a comparison, these are the amounts that were approved as our budgets for 2024. You'll see here in 2025, education fund. So first, remember we talked about half hour ago, about $2.5 million of curricular materials are now moving here. So that's 67.5, you can move that to 70, and then I've increased it 5% on top of that. Again, we don't know what that funding is gonna be, but if you looked at 2 years ago, the state was given 5.5% that first year of the biennium, so that's why I've increased it about 5% here. We don't know what it's gonna be. It could be 3%, it could be 8. We'll figure that out there. Operations fund, increasing that by about 3%. Again, with our assessed value going up, that might bring more dollars in. Same with the referendum operating fund, slightly increasing that as well. The pension fund going away, no budget there. The debt service fund increased significantly, but we also sold GO bonds in 2023 and 2024, and those principals are starting in 2025. So that is why we got about a $2.5 million increase there. Additionally, back in 2010, 2011, the U.S. economy was kind of a little bit of a recession, and there was the stimulus dollars that were pumped in. This was like prior to like the pre-ESSER. And so in order to pump money into the economy, people were able to apply for what were called quality school construction bonds, QSCABs. And it was to be able to, do school improvements in districts, and it was interest-free, and the feds were paying the interest on it.
Oh, wow.
So that's great. So I pay the interest amount every year since then, and then I get a check back from the feds to offset that. Well, now we're about 15 years in, and now we have 4 principal payments on that. It's about $2 million a year as well. We'll have those paid off in 2026. So those are the 3 reasons why our debt service fund is increasing from 2024 to 2025. Should not significantly go up much more after that, but we never know. And you can see our referendum debt fund, pretty consistent, slightly lower. So our advertised rate last year at this time was about 89 cents, and we are advertising approximately 2.5 cents lower this year as compared to last year. If you look at our historical comparison, in the middle column, I show for the last 5, 6 years what we advertised, and then how that compares to what was actually certified. Again, we advertise high to protect ourselves. So there's no science to it. I don't want to really overinflate the advertised amount too much, but you can see it's generally sometimes around 10 cents lower than what we're advertising. So we're advertising 86.87 cents. I wouldn't be surprised if our actual rate is closer to the 80 cent mark, 78 cent mark. We won't know until we get our certified amount in December or January. So again, want to be consistent to our taxpayers as much as possible. This chart just kind of shows that same history, and you can see on the red line, our assessed value has gone up, but our tax rate for Lake Central has stayed steady and actually slightly decreased a little bit over the years here. So, in summary, my recommendation for the 2025 budget amounts are $73.5 million for the education fund, $26 million for operations, $14 million for referendum operating, $10,785,968 for debt service, 0 for the pension bonds, and $12,356,500 for the referendum debt fund. Those estimates and the funds to be raised will then be posted on not only on our website, but the state's Gateway Public Access site. As I mentioned in the beginning, we'll hold a public hearing on September 16th, and then we would adopt the budget on October 7th. This is kind of what these 2 slides are what the taxpayers would see on the Gateway system. Again, identifying what I just mentioned about the different types of hearings. Again, estimate of $66,000 for our tax cap. And then this shows, the last slide is showing what our budget estimate is, estimate of the funds to be raised, and how that compares to the current levy. So, any questions or comments? Follow up.
I have a question, and it might be a stupid one, because you always amaze us at these presentations. I think we're all just sitting here going, would you repeat all this again? But
If you want to sit here, I don't think you do.
on the retirement severance, and I remember when that happened, now that there will be, it's a zero, where will the money come from to
So,
pay for
right.
that?
So, when the bonds were sold, that money came, the bond money came and is sitting in a fund in my books. The debt to pay off those bonds is now being paid off. I still have money in my
Okay.
fund to pay for those retirees who are on the, we call it on the buyout plan.
Okay.
For everybody else, we're making ongoing contributions every year into their 401A and VEBA in July, and that's built into our regular annual budget. But for the people on the.
Okay,
But
okay.
for the buyout people, now, the people on the buyout plan are getting less and less each year.
Right.
As are the funds in my fund getting less and less
Right.
each year. But, you just never know how close, I mean, this was based on an actuarial study back in 2002, 2003, predicting how many sick days your employees are gonna have. So even now, when we have less than 30 people on the buyout plan, it's still hard for us to predict what the payout is going to be, because some people have, everyone goes through things, and people may have a good bank of sick days now, but it just takes one health issue, and next thing you know, it wipes out lots of them. So, we watch it. We have some great staff members who are still gonna be around for a little while, and, but we will pay them out accordingly.
Yeah.
So I have the long story short is I have the money.
Okay, and so that should, that money in that account should zero out at the same time that all these people that were on that buyout plan
Theoretically,
retire.
we may have money left over, we may be short.
What are you gonna do
it was
with the
based
money?
on-
What are you gonna do with the money if you have any left over?
We'll move it. Yeah, we'll use it for the ongoing retirement contributions.
Move it into that, okay. Thank you for the explanation.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you, Rob.
Okay, so now I seek your permission to advertise said budget.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any questions, discussion?
Oh, my gosh.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Well, that's all I had. I only had 2 items tonight.
Yay!
Great job, Mr. James. Great job. And we have no public comments, so we will go into board comments and consideration of future agenda items. Ms. Kelly?
I'm speechless by Mr. James' presentation, so I have nothing to say.
Mrs. Talent?
Amazing, of course, and also I just want, in reflecting, we had such great presentations from our staff at the last couple board meetings. We really appreciate that, and way to go, Rob. You always knock it out of the ballpark.
Thank you,
Well,
Dr.
I appreciate the comments, but I would also echo what you said. I have a role, and I can talk about my role, but I can't talk about things that everyone
Right.
else is doing.
Right.
So everyone else
Sure.
is doing great things too. So don't boost me up when everyone else is doing just as good things in their role as well. So anyway.
Dr. Malco?
Well, I'm sort of like Nicole right now. I'm kind of speechless, which is rather unusual for me, so I think I will pass. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll turn it over to Dr. Varacco for board calendar of future activities.
Okay, so our next meeting will be here back to Monday in 13 days on September 16th. And we'll have an update for you at that point on how we're doing with negotiations and probably not on healthcare until the first meeting in October. But we'll keep you posted on that because it's important and that may be an executive session depending on how it's going, because we won't go public until we have a tentative agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
And we are adjourned.